Okay, thank you very much. I will be discussing Microsoft Access Forms, some tips and techniques. I guess I won't be talking too much about layout, properties, things like that on forms, so we'll kind of skip and move that around. I'm not exactly sure how to go through this. I mean, I have some tips that are higher level, more complicated, and then some that are more basic. So we'll just go through it. I have a lot of content. I think I have a lot of content, but you never know. Maybe I'll go through quickly and run out of content. So we will see. All right, great. So just a little bit of background. My name's Luke Chung. I'm the president and founder of FMS. We're in our 31st year of business. I've been involved in all of the design of the products that we've created, and I've been a developer of many of them. Many Access, SQL Server, and some .NET products. I'm a Microsoft Access MVP, past president of the Entrepreneurs Group in DC. I currently serve on an IT governance board for my county in Fairfax, Virginia. I have a master's degree in physical oceanography, which is very similar to a master's in physics, which I also have degrees. FMS is a software company. If you're not familiar with us, there's a folder that I've passed around. We're the leading third-party provider of Microsoft Access products for customers all around the world. We have products for developers, for end users, for administrators, and just to help you create better applications, take more control over them, and deliver them in a more professional manner. We have over 50,000 customers in over 100 countries. There are lots of Access users and developers around the world, and we serve a wide range from both big and small. I also have another venture, totally unrelated to Access, our Sentinel Visualizer product in our Advanced Systems group, which does advanced data visualization and link analysis, primarily used in the law enforcement and counterterrorism space. For me, being in Northern Virginia, counterterrorism is a local business. It is literally on the street I live on. The National Counterterrorism Center is a classified location. You're not allowed to know what that is. It's classified. The location's classified. So one day, my daughter comes to me and says, "How come no one told me that NCTC is on the end of our street?" I'm like, "Where'd you hear that? Where'd you get that information?" It's like, "It's on Google." I go to Google Maps and it's sitting right there. It's where the Director of National Intelligence is, literally on my street. And like, I was trying to give somebody directions to our house and looked on the map and it's there. I'm like, how can that be on Google? Anyway, Liberty Square. So we have an investment from Incuto, which is a CIA's venture arm, and we do some work in that. That actually, to be frank, we're doing that business, 75% international, lots of work in Africa, lots of work in the Middle East, as you can imagine. It's fascinating stuff that we're doing in there. And I actually did some work with the UN Office of Drug and Crime in Austria, Vienna, Austria, a few years ago, and have been working with them around the world. So lots of bad people out there. We're trying to do our best to keep them under control. So, actually, I don't do anything. I just write software. There's some like really brave people that actually go out and do things. I just sit at a computer. Then we have, we support lots of different products and develop in lots of different applications. So, I just want to give a brief introduction as we move on to start at the basics with Access Forms, because really it comes down to displaying data. And we start out with data being in tables and queries. And these could be local tables, these could be linked tables, but some of the things that you set up in tables and the properties and the rules that are set up in tables go through to the form level, right? So some do, some don't, and some get inherited and some don't. So tables, queries, you link through multiple tables. With queries, you can display calculated fields, right? Calculated fields don't exist in the underlying tables, but the formats and things that you put on the calculated fields do go forward. Queries support VBA functions, and they can also support user-defined functions, either in expressions or in columns completely derived from a function that could be on its own or pass fields from the records into your function that display that data, right? And then fields have formatting properties to display data, and there are different formats for text versus numbers versus dates. They're input masks that are used to control data entry, and they're validation rules and validation text that can be set at the field level. The table itself also has a validation rule and validation text that can be set. Now, some of these can be superseded by forms, and some can't. So one of the things that we'll start with is just the numeric format, right? So the format for a number, you can set just using the format display, and you can set, usually we would want to put it as standard, no decimal points or 1 decimal point. Dates have a variety of different formats, and you have to keep in mind, format properties are different from the actual data that's stored. So oftentimes we will show, for instance, in some transaction log data, times, rather than the date and the time, because we know the dates, let's say the duration of the time is fairly short, we don't need to see the date, we just want to know the time. It started at 8 a.m., it ended at 8:30. But the data that's stored includes the date, right? So that never changes, but the format does. But these have implications at either the table level or at the form level when you decide to display it, right? And it's much better to set properties than it is to set code. So take advantage of, in particular, these formats rather than coding them yourself, because these also respect regional settings. So those people in Germany, they don't know how to use commas or periods properly, like they've got them reversed. This will automatically reflect that, right? And then, and different, order of, they've got their month, day backwards. I mean, it's a mess over there.
We've got it in sequence.
So, yeah, we're the only country in the world, right, that does month, day, year. But anyway, so when you set it up to use, let's say, short date, it respects the Windows regional settings, so whoever uses it will get it in the way that they expect. Very different than if you hard code it and say like mn/dd/yy. Yeah, YY. Although we've gone far enough past Y2K, I really wish these things would go back to 2-digit years, right? Because I don't need the extra width for the 20 anymore. So some examples of formatting. Just show an example up here, the top one, where there's no formatting. You show dates and times, and then the duration, which is just the subtraction of the begin and end times, and then how we would want to display it, where we just want to show the times where things began and end, and then the minutes or seconds that took place. Right? And this is handled by formatting. There's no code whatsoever. It can be in a data sheet, can be in a form. So this is just really the most basic of formatting data that you would expect in tables and forms, or queries, right? Because queries fields also have controls. Formatting settings. So when you display data in tables and queries, Access supports essentially the same thing when you're using these in data sheets, right? In data sheets that will end up in forms. And these data sheets allow you to edit the data, presuming you have permissions or the queries are set up in a way that they are updatable. Records can be filtered from the column header or individual cells. Great stuff that Tim Gesh did with his team back when he was running things in the Access team. Yeah. With the smart, filtering on dates, understanding the current day, quarter, month, last month, things like that. Multi-value selects, and things like that just come for free. This is the kind of stuff that is really valuable and expensive to do in other platforms. You just put the data together, there's no code, you get all of these UI things for free. And you want to make sure you don't prevent the users from having this when they use a form. So for instance, if you want your users to be able to filter data, right-click and filter a value, use multi-value, things like that, you have to set the allow filter property for the form to allow that. If that's set to no, then they don't get that feature. When we go from the data sheet, from the tables and queries level and go to forms, we're really moving forward in several areas. One is displaying the data in a different way from a grid, so that's one thing. But the other is controlling what users are allowed to do. Right? You can control whether it's read-only or not. You can control whether you allow people to edit or not. You can control whether you allow people to delete, insert, add new records, things like that. And then, of course, there's a whole event model that's surrounding forms that don't exist in datasheets and queries. Now, when you design a form and you take a control from a table or query and put it on your form in a text box, it inherits the properties from that control. So if that property, it inherits the properties of that field. So if that field has validation rules and validation text or formatting or input masks or any of those settings that help display or control the data entry on it, that shows up on your form, okay? Which is kind of the way you would expect it. However, it is not connected. So when later you modify the settings on the form or on the table, they do not sync each other up. Right? And people get confused sometimes because they change properties on the tables field, assuming that all of the forms that reference it will also respect it. And the point is that they don't. Question? Okay. Feel free to interrupt at any time. We're being recorded, so I can't say everything that might pop into my head. I'll try to not to do that. Access form displays. So these forms are used to allow users to be able to view and edit the data, and they're at the top level 4 major ways of displaying the data. Right? We have a data sheet grid, very similar to table or a query view. A single record, so your whole screen fills up to show one record. And you have options to let people move from one record to another. You have continuous forms, which are kind of like formatted data sheets, except each row is formatted much nicer. And then split forms. Right? So the ability to see a data sheet and a single record all at once. Right? So that was a nice feature that was added in 2007. So these are properties that are set by that you can set with the default view. Single form, data sheet, continuous form, or split form. What's important to do, so an example of that is this just a single form from Northwind, right? So 1 row per screen. You can have, you can show the same thing in datasheet view, and it would just show 1 row, all the rows basically in a grid. Here's an example of a split view. So a split view is, I'm sorry, it's so small, is basically a grid, a data sheet with the form view combined in one, right? And as you move from one record to another, I think I have that up in here, something like this, you know, as you move through here, the record's automatically shown here. Right? How many people use split forms? A couple? All right. So this has some nice advantages. I mean, the nice thing is it doesn't require any programming. You can specify the data sheet. Let's see, you can put the data sheet on the bottom, and then you can view it. And now the data sheet's on the bottom, your record's up here. So you just lay it out the way you normally would a form. And then you have these options to control the data sheet. Oh, and there's a splitter bar. So let's see, let's move that to the right. So there's a splitter bar that is available. You can turn it on or off, and then you can move it back and forth, or the user can do it. And this involves no code whatsoever. Right? One of the limitations of split forms that we discovered, and I think most people discover it once they love using it, is that it doesn't work inside a tab. And then you're like, oh, crap. So, I mean, traditionally, the way you would do this is you would have a subform. You would have this main form and then a subform for your data sheet. Yeah?
I used it once years ago. I'm trying to remember, there was another issue, I think, with trying to hide certain columns or something. If you know what I'm talking about?
Right, so all the columns in your data sheet show up in the split form.
And you can't.
They're essentially the same thing. So when you're designing it, when you're designing this, so that's a good point. When you're designing this, this is all you see. You're laying this out just like a regular form view. And if you were to just look at this in let me see, let me allow data sheet. If you went to look in data sheet view, this is what it would be, right? And then if you went to the traditional form view, without the split form. just a single form, that's what it would be. So it's essentially just taking the same thing and doing more. If you do need to make them different, then you actually need to go ahead and create the subform, right?
You can do it a little bit. Like you can hide fields just by changing their width.
On both sides?
If you want it on, if you want it in the detail in this view, but you don't want it in the data sheet, you can just hide the column in the data sheet.
You can do that.
Yeah, you just show it right here.
How do you hide the column? There's no separate object.
Right click and hide, go to view it and right click and hide.
Oh, okay. Let me go to subform.
Yeah, you can have all.
Oh, maybe this would be good.
Yeah, so maybe I gave up too soon.
So just
So
right
we
click
say we
and
don't-
hide.
And you can
Hide field.
Oh.
Sweet.
So that goes that way, but is there any way to go the other way?
If you want to have it, yeah, well, if you want to have it visible, I think you could try making the field invisible. I don't remember if that.
This over on this side?
Yeah, on the form, so do
Just right there.
visible no or something.
Yeah, you tried one
Yeah,
out
I'm
here.
pretty sure there was a way, because we did it for the
You
book.
can, for sure, you can make it like a zero width control over here. So there's hacks you can do to make
And
it
then
happen.
there's
Wait a second, but
Yeah,
this
yeah,
one error.
columns work with us.
No, the column's still over here.
Yeah, so you can make it
So you do have some
invisible.
control over those,
You
yeah.
can make both.
I can make it invisible over here. I understood I could make it invisible on the form side,
Yeah.
and it would still appear on the data sheet side. But I didn't know it was the other way around.
Yeah,
Well, you learn something new every day. That's great.
But that'll still be available for anybody to unhide it if it's
Sure,
really
right.
something that
Well,
you
Sure.
depending
I mean,
if they-
Right.
Yeah, you can, the data sheet will have everything
Right.
technically available. You can go find it if you
Yeah.
want to.
If you know what you're doing.
But you can't put it on a tab.
No.
Right. Yeah, you can't put the whole thing in a tab. And actually, just so you know, the form header is actually not a header for the whole form. It's with the form view side. So at one point I was expecting like this header would go across the whole top, no matter where the data sheet were.
Then in that case, change your layout and just put you can have your split form top bottom. And then you can have
With the header
your
across the top.
header across the top.
Well, you can't do, you just
Luke,
can't
next
do it.
Right.
time you're up here, we'll give you a copy of the 2007 book.
No. This, if you put it on the bottom, no. This is, if you put the data sheet on the bottom, that's fine. But if you put the data sheet on the top,
Right, that's what I said.
right, the header is still at the bottom. See, the header is stuck with the form. I
Right,
kind of wanted the header at the top.
well, that's why I said, put the form at the top.
So I want the page, I want the form header,
Subform.
right, I want the form header up top, and then I want the grid, and then I want the details at the bottom. That's what I would like.
It's like the
Or
document. Don't do that.
I want it on the left, I want the data sheet on the left, and the detail on the right, but the header going across the
He's
top.
gonna tell you to make it a sub, the whole.
Yeah, exactly. So then you use it for a little while, and then you crap, I gotta go use subform anyway,
In a
so.
standard data sheet, you don't have a header either.
Huh?
In a standard data sheet form, there is no header either.
Right, correct. So in a standard data sheet, there would be no header.
So this is actually a great technique for giving your data sheet a header. So what you can do is actually put it on top, and then you can pull this header
Right.
up so none of the fields are visible. We do this all the time, which actually kind of gives you some of the features that Anders was demonstrating. So you basically do this, and now you get a rich data sheet below.
Look at
with
that,
all the
look at
forms.
that, fabulous.
That's
That's a tip.
Right, so that's a split form that hides the split part just to get.
Yeah, so basically, you can turn the splitter bar
Right.
off, you can turn
Right.
the horizontal
Right.
scroll bar off, so it actually looks just like a header
Right.
on a data sheet.
So that's the property over here.
Buttons on
And you
it.
can erase it, the whole
Yeah.
thing,
Oh,
like, it's
So
not
if you get all the rich functionality of a data sheet, but you have a
Right.
full form header.
So here you say split form splitter bar, you turn that off, and then you essentially have this.
I think Northwind had an example.
Northwind has
You guys
this.
should have picked that up. Yeah.
Oh, it's so well documented.
That's pretty good.
even the same Northwind that's not delivered with the product anymore?
You know, when you want to control the font in that data sheet, you have to go to options, right? That's the only place to control that font on that data sheet?
Well, you can change the font here.
Again.
Yeah.
It's
here.
global across
Okay.
the whole
Okay.
data sheet.
Okay.
You don't get to do each column.
Right. Oh, and I'm sorry if the font's too small to see, so
Conditional format.
I will change that. Anyway, so there's the split view, split forms is useful if you want to do some things. Here's a tip that I would give. Oftentimes people don't set this right, is for forms, turning off permissions for the views you don't want users to see. Right? So in Access 2016, you have the option to allow form view, allow datasheet view, allow layout view. In 2010 and earlier, you had some more options. If you have these all set as yes, then when your form is displayed, your users can right-click and see options like changing it to layout view or datasheet view. I mean, if you were a ACCDE or something, they wouldn't have a design view. But they can automatically switch it to other views if you don't disable these options. So we see this quite a lot. Users get confused when they, when people are using their apps.
Of course, you can disable the entire menu with removing the special key, going into startup options and removing those. But you can do them individually here, is what you're saying.
Right, you can do them individually here. I think if you remove menus, then they can't like right-click and filter, right?
Yeah, it's pretty all or nothing.
Yeah,
on,
yeah, I think that goes for all sorts of other.
But there's so many other easy ways of adding the filtering that we do a lot of times, like our
Yeah, we kind of built our own filtering options, but yeah.
So powerful.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, look at this great stuff that Tim put together here that automatically filters by this day and all this
I
stuff.
find that that's great for developers.
I was going to say,
A lot of users understand that about as much as the non.
Really?
But the minute you
Huh.
go to runtime, it goes away.
Yeah, that's
Gotta
not
put
available.
training in.
Yeah, and
not
that's
available in runtime.
I mean,
Right.
if it's not available runtime, it doesn't exist.
And the multi-select values?
Yeah, it's all great stuff for me, but yeah, if it's not in runtime or if it's too complex, then
Sure.
yeah.
You've
It's
met
choices.
Luke,
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
so the menu is available on runtime,
No.
it's just not on the right click, you can programmatically launch the menu. So we actually use we expose that menu in the runtime by having, we actually listen to the right click and programmatically, I don't remember which run command it is, it's like show filter or something like that. But you can programmatically get that menu to launch. But the problem is in the runtime, by default, all the right-click menus are turned off.
Right.
So the feature's there, you just have to programmatically turn it on.
And you have to listen for where you are too.
Yeah, that's actually another thing that's really hacky, is the menu shows up wherever your mouse is. So if you have a button, so we've also done hacks where you actually set focus where you want the menu to show up, and then trigger the command. So you have a button over here, it's really wonky.
Yeah, so never mind.
But you're
So it's like if you have a specific column you want to have the filtering on, if you trigger the command, the menu might not show up next to that column. Kind of set focus where you want, and then trigger the
position
command,
first.
and then it'll show up over there.
User voice site, I think we heard about that today.
Right, so,
Let's just ask Shane.
so Tim has a great deal of history and knowledge of how these things happen. I actually had the pleasure of having Tim come out to DC like a month ago to lobby on Capitol Hill about issues that Microsoft and small businesses and technology issues are important to at least American small business, but all small business and technology. And Tim learned all about how our government really works. How do you feel about that,
I
Tim?
get to hear more about how the sausage is made.
Tim got involved with the sausage making. You feel a little dirty now?
Fine city.
So, for those, I showed this to the Access MVP group, but we created a website, a web page that does a history of Access versions and different features that got added and deprecated over time. And I'm going to take a little bit of that out of this for this presentation, which are formulated. But you can go to our website and see this. let's see, what did I do with it? I had it at one point. Let's look at this developer page. So, so this is kind of like a step through the past, which shows in a matrix, you know, from 1.0 to 2019, which I'm predicting, but who knows. All the different versions, the latest service packs, check marks on what it is for all the different categories, from database format and security, programming, database container issues, link tables, field data types when they were introduced, when they went away, and then different features, you know, command bars, ActiveX controls, data access pages have a little life in here, pivot charts and pivot tables, smart tags, source shape, blah, blah, blah. Data collection emails has 2 check marks. And so this can give you an overview of what's come in and out of Access over all the years and versions. This is a work in progress. If you see something that should be there or something wrong, let me know and we'll try to update it. We didn't try to go into the areas of like VBA commands or macro commands or individual things at that level. Just high level stuff, and this is stuff that Microsoft Access supports, not something with a third party or some sort of hack or whatever. This is just what normal people would be able to get.
Luke, quick question on here. Do you have a section for tabbing from control to subform to control? Is there an entry there for tab functionality?
Tabs?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. No, I don't mean tabs, I mean like tab control.
Tab control.
Field to field.
Field to field. Yeah, I mean, we've had tabs
Yes.
and controlling. Okay. Well, the bottom section is operating systems. So, yes, so there are different features that are there and things that have gone in and out. So, let's see, where's my presentation?
That's on your website, Luke?
Yes, yes, and I'll give you the slide, and it's our website, fmsh.com/microsoft-access/history /features. Okay, so, but that's in the presentation down here if you want. It took a lot of time to pull all it together, a lot of arguing also. But anyway, in the forms aspect, things that impact forms, we had command bars, started in Access 2.0 and ended with 2003. Yes, there are some variations with it after 2003, but ribbons are the ones that predominate after that. So that's the new user interface. Yes, I know you can get command bars onto ribbons, but the point is ribbons are the new display. Data access pages, you can consider them forms or not. They lasted for a few versions. Conditional formatting. So being able to change colors of individual cells on individual rows based on values in the cell, in the field record, and or references to other fields in that record. So that showed up in 2002 and persisted today. There were a couple things that started in 2000, ended in 2010, pivot charts, pivot tables in particular, and smart tags. So did anyone ever use smart tags?
Well, yes, but it actually started in 2003.
It started in 2003? Oh.
But it's gone, so it doesn't really matter.
Well, we'll want to make sure our data is correct. So,
Get another argument.
but did people use that? I thought that was going to be really hot with the legal community. But
Well, it didn't make nearly as much sense in Access as it did in other.
Like Word,
yeah, it wasn't as programmatic. The theory was people would make add-ins that would detect data all throughout your Word and your Excel document. In Access, we couldn't just like have it scan your data and then like selectively put stuff where your data is. So basically, it was easier for you to just write code behind a click event than it was to build a whole separate DLL. So I don't know anybody that actually built a third-party smart tag.
Right. Neither do I. Okay. So UI features. So lots of things changed with Access 2007, and these are the UI features. These are the things that users would experience differently. Yeah.
Did you ask how many people use pivot charts?
Oh, I know lots of people use pivot charts and pivot tables. I don't need to ask about that. That's why a lot of people are still stuck in Access 2010, right? So, yeah.
With the operating system,
Were you predicting that 2019 isn't going to run on anything but Windows 10?
Microsoft has already announced that Office 2019, not just Access, will not run the standalone, the one that you install off disk, will be Windows 10 only.
Yeah.
Yeah, Windows 10 only. And then I guess we got a clarification the other day that the version that you install off of Office 365 will support the operating systems that are currently being supported, the latest versions of those.
I don't believe if you try and put it on an earlier one, it will fail. It just won't be supported.
Correct. So if you have an older version of Windows 7 that hasn't been patched to the latest, they say it will still install and not block you, but technically it's not supported. However, what they're going to distribute on disk will not allow you to do that. So the perpetual license version, they're demanding it be on Windows 10, period. Is that what we heard back? Is that what you remember? We're in the same room. See, the witness on the stand, we saw the same data, but we have different police reports. What happened? What really happened? I took pretty close notes on that. And that's what I'm going with. Ask other people for their experiences, which may or may not be the same as mine.
That's why eyewitnesses are no longer supported.
That's right. Okay, so things that impact the UI since Access 2007, ribbons, of course, the new data types, attachment fields, and multi-value fields you may need to support. Data sheets now have a totals row. I mean, and the reason I mention this is we often receive legacy database applications that need to be upgraded or need to be enhanced, and they often don't have these features, even if they were built after Access 2007, because whoever built it just wasn't aware or wasn't comfortable using these new features. And essentially, these are features that we can turn on for free, right? I mean, just setting a property and off we go to make the user's experience a lot easier. So totals row on data sheets is great. The smart filter, we don't really have to turn on that for columns and fields and multi-value selects. That's more of a training issue. Alternating row colors on data sheets, so you can change the colors on alternating rows. It makes it a little bit easier to see. Navigation bar caption, right? So instead of a navigation bar always saying record one of whatever, you can change the word record to something else. Date fields now have a date picker, which is nice. No time picker, but a date picker. So we're halfway there.
Just don't use a format on stock.
A date format. A date format should be okay. Don't use an input mask. Input mask. Input masks on dates are really...
Actually, I'll just generalize that. Don't use an input mask.
At
all. Ever.
No. There's certain things where it makes sense. You know, like a social security number or something like that. There's input masks for like Canadian zip codes or something like that that help you with the validation so that you don't need to do the validation manually, right? Without having to code.
But don't do it on a date.
Dates should not have input masks. And, you know, if you take over somebody else's database or you take over your own database, it would be good to know all the places you use input masks just to make sure that that's a good idea, right? And then some of the other things, more on the design side, I guess on the UI side, the tab view, of course, the split form that you get to decide. I guess these are decisions that you make on how you want to display your application. You can now do form resizing very nicely, anchoring controls and making them resize, stretching across the whole form or up or down. One of the things that's missing in anchoring is centering. So I don't know if you guys are working on that, but having a control that centers on the form all the time, no matter how they resize, is not something that's possible.
You can do that.
Yeah, how? Not with anchoring.
3 columns, all anchored to the width. The middle column will stay in the middle.
You're talking
In
layout
fact,
views.
you don't even have that. You don't. So you anchor the two. You have 3 columns.
Three controls.
You create a layout.
A layout.
You create
A layout, using a layout.
You create a layout with 3 columns.
Okay,
The middle column you make whatever width you want.
right?
The right and the left column you anchor to the width. so they will size equally, and your control will stay in the middle. And you can do the same thing if you want it vertically in the middle. You can put 2 rows, one above and one below, anchor. You can keep things centered without any code.
Okay.
And if you want it to size as well and stay centered, you can make it.
Okay, I'll have to play with that.
You can do it.
We're playing around with that and have it, but then you have all these controls that are now like in the middle of your form, and you have other controls you need on that form.
Fair. You can split your, it's complicated.
Okay, so if you have a form that you just want to have one button and you want to keep it in the center, then this might work. And Tim has some ideas there. But in the scenario where you have multiple buttons on a
But
form,
so then you say multiple rows, because you're just talking columns. So you have columns and rows, right?
You either column or a row.
You might be able to do.
okay, well, now that you've given me the idea, I will investigate that. But it's not obvious with the anchoring. Feature. So it's a combination of anchoring with the layout.
Yes. And that's in 2010 specifically, because in 2010, you can actually have multiple columns or multiple rows anchored. In 2007, if you set the anchoring on one row or one column, that overrides it. You can only do one at a time. But starting in 2010, you can actually kind of split the anchoring between multiple columns, so that multiple columns will equally expand.
Okay, all right, we'll have to check that out, and then break backward compatibility with 2007.
Yes.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah. So layout view, this whole empty cell. Would you like to explain empty cell?
Well, I think that was probably, I actually didn't do anything with empty cell. I was around when it was created, but I think that was part of what enables us to share some of the data across.
Right.
But
that's 2010, and that what allows you to basically split and merge cells. I think the original one you just get columns and grids.
Right.
With 2010, you can go in and you can say, oh, I want to split this one cell in a column. And then I want to merge a couple. And you can basically create whatever layout you want.
Right. No, and I remember they were trying to do that with HTML and stuff like that.
Anybody try to remove an empty cell? Well, seriously, because it's in the way.
Right.
That's what Anders said in his presentation. That's when you go crazy and you just remove the entire layout. No? Because if you have an empty cell in the wrong position, you don't see, you can't select it, you can't do nothing. You can push delete until your finger is
You're supposed to merge it. That's the way you're An empty cell is basically a cell that doesn't have control in it.
Right.
If you want to add a control on a position where you have an empty cell, but you don't want it to be inside that control, then you lost it.
it's very difficult to do this.
Yes. So that's empty cell, and thank you for providing feedback on that. I too have suffered from the inability to delete an empty cell. So, because it's rather frustrating, because it like knows it's empty, and you're like, go away, but it stays. The other thing is command buttons have graphics or captions. You can add hyperlink hands as a change for it's a separate property where it looks more like what you expect on a hyperlink on a web browser. Image controls now can have a control source, so we can actually reference fields. And then there's a new web browser controller. Right? So those are the things that are available there. Of course, a big thing that was added was report views. So these aren't forms, but we've found in many cases they can be used to replace forms. So report views are like print preview, except you can interactively filter the data. So it allows users to do ad hoc filtering on their data in a report format. All the totals and summaries and things like that automatically recalculate for the records that pass the filter. So that is really wonderful. And we've seen lots of applications where people previously built ad hoc query forms or ad hoc query settings to be able to do filtering and searching, and that can be eliminated by enabling report views or having multiple types of report views to support that. Right? So, Here's a little tip that I want to share on these buttons with graphics on them. So if you've ever tried to put a graphic, a picture on a command button, you will find that sometimes it comes back without a transparent back. And it would be nice to have it transparent. So this example here is an access graphic. It's just a, I don't know, a bitmap or something like that. And I insert it in one button, and it leaves a white border around it. And in another button, it's transparent, right? And so it all depends on how bitmaps are stored in your database. So if under Access Options, Current Database, the picture property says Preserve Source Image Format, the first one, the default one that an ACCDB will happen, when you insert that picture, it will not come in transparent. If you change it to the second one and insert it, it is transparent.
I'd like to clarify what's happening here.
Oh, okay, sure.
The bitmap that he has there has white in it. In earlier versions, or if you change the option, it treats the white as transparent. If you really want transparent images, you can get it even with that option checked, where it's getting white here, if you have transparency in your image. But it was sort of a hack that we had before, where if you had white, it treated as transparent, which often cases was a reasonable thing to do.
But wait, if it's a BMP file, can you get a transparency in a BMP file?
You may have to use a format that supports transparency.
Right, right. So you may need to go to a different format.
That's one of the cool things is to go look back when the first versions came out, like in 2003, and look at the way people did forms. You should show some of those, you know, like the green globe in the fields. It's,
First version, 2003?
well, some of those older versions, what they thought forms were. No, what they thought forms were really weird though.
Right, so what I'm talking about here is just this graphic and then this embedded. In this case, it's an Access MVP file. So these are bitmaps. It's basically the same Access MVP file inserted into this versus this graphic based on what that option setting was.
And Luke, is that an access switch or this database switch?
It's this database switch, and you can actually change it on the fly. You don't have to reopen your database. Once you change that setting, it behaves differently. But
Does
it's maybe good or bad.
Does it behave differently on the insert of the image, or does the already inserted image change?
Anything already done is not changed.
Got it.
Okay. So what's interesting, and Shane helped out with this also, is the problem that we have if we were to take this and then try to copy and paste it. So this one, which was inserted with the new version, where it's not transparent, if I copy and paste, it works fine. But with the old one, the old format, if I copy and then paste, the image is lost.
It's all transparent.
Okay, so it's completely transparent. Right. So that's a feature. However, Shane helped and showed that there's a way to get around this. Because when you do this bitmap thing, if you go and delete this bitmap and leave, it will prompt, do you want to remove that from this picture from the control? And what you say is, no, I don't want to remove it. And it stays there. Now when I copy and paste it, it stays.
So much easier to use when it's that way.
That is a deep cut.
This is a valuable meeting.
I think the drawback, though, it was a shared resource because it had the name.
No, the name is just an artifact. Once you embed it, the name is not used except to cause that button.
Right. So once you do that, it now says in parentheses bitmap instead of the file name. So you removed it, it just says bitmap, so it is still there. Now, here's the other part of this. If we, let me do this side by side. If we expand the height of these graphics, these buttons, they're different. So if it's inserted in the new format, it stays kind of where you expect, which is in the middle. If it's in the old format, it's aligned top.
So this is 2016, not
Yeah.
0365?
I don't know if it's 0365, because I don't keep track of that.
To file about, what are we on?
File, it is.
File and account.
Account.
Count there.
I know this program.
So
Maybe about
he's-
that.
Am I updated? Not?
You're a year old.
Fix me. Yeah, I usually don't let these things update on their own, because who knows what happens. I may not even be able to give the presentation if nothing happens.
Don't do it.
Right, yeah, I'm not doing it right now, okay, so I'm not gonna do that right now.
I think we fixed that in
It's,
0360.
it's not a click to run.
Are you gonna talk about shared resources at all?
I was not planning on it.
Oh, so one thing that, I think this was 2010 that we added this. So in the past, all images were just embedded in the form. And so if you use a lot of graphics, you will actually notice the size of your database will blow significantly because the graphics are then encoded. Like you probably don't want that.
Right.
And also, if you do something like you want the transparency, you probably want to use a PNG. So you can do embedded, you can actually click on any of those images, any of those things, and look at the picture property. Notice it says picture type embedded. Change the picture type to shared. Okay, so now that that graphic can actually be used throughout your entire application, and it's only saved once.
Right.
In fact, if you show,
It's here.
can you show in the nav pane all objects?
Resource.
Yeah, you want to see the MSys
Oh, yeah.
resources table. Yeah. So if you look at the MSys resources, that now has an attachment field for that image. So it's actually saving the graphic as the actual PNG, JPEG, whatever. So the one thing that's kind of messed up is if you put a JPEG on an embedded thing, you're basically saving it as a bitmap. And then you copy it, like, this is one of my pet peeves on every single form that's created, you get the little icon. By default, that little icon is embedded. And so you have just extra graphics all over the application. So I always either remove that or change those to shared
Sure.
Good to know.
graphics.
Good to know.
But can you, how do you put a shared graphic on the button?
Right.
Yeah, he
Yeah, I just did it. I just did that. Right.
Once it's there.
Once it's there, it shows up on your property. I just actually changed it here. See, so let me really get rid of this graphic here. Yes. See, so now here under design, they're under images.
Right. and
So you get a collection of
so
images.
you can drag it onto the
Yeah.
button?
You just click on it and it's
So
added.
everything that's shared throughout your whole app shows up
Right.
there.
Okay.
And you can-
Right.
The other thing-
Now, the implications of this are you cannot export or use this form in older versions of Access. So if this form then needs to be imported or exported to Access 2007, definitely 2003, but was this a problem in 2007?
I can't remember.
This has restrictions on,
This came out in 2010.
right,
So it's not backward compatible with anything other than that. The other thing just to point out is, let's say Access updates its logo, and you're using that throughout your database, you can go in there and right click and say, basically refresh the image, you replace the one place, your
Yes.
entire application's updated.
Right.
So
so that's very nice. So if you have things, like if you're building the same app for multiple companies or something, and you want a corporate logo, I mean, this is a great way to do it. You save it in one place and it replicates.
It was mentioned earlier that it's stored as a bitmap. When you put it as shared, it gets stored as a bitmap. How does that handle, or does it handle different sizes of the same, like with icons, you have different
So the
sizes?
size is the size. So Access handles the size and basically displays it based on whether you have this, if it were in an image control, whether you stretch or clip or zoom on it. In a button, it just takes it and shows it at that size. Even if the button were smaller, it doesn't adjust for the size of the,
Right, so if you have a form icon, which you can form a report icons, it would handle making it smaller.
right. If you had the image on here, as if you had an image, let's say, for the background of the form, then there's the,
Yeah, you can just
Just
do
go
the
up
picture right there.
Go up to insert image and
Share.
pull it down.
right. No, I was thinking of a full screen splash, excuse me, a splash screen. You know, that's just, I mean, something that fills up the whole screen, and therefore you want it to clip, or like a picture. Like you can clip it or shrink it and different things. So anyway, so I have like 5 minutes and probably a few more slides to go. let's see, so, that was it. Okay, so I already went through the transparent picture. Okay, so I want to quickly show cascading combo boxes. So, people I'm sure use this. We have a paper on our website that has it, cascading combo boxes. After update event, it essentially sends the combo box for the row source property on the next selected item. And let's see, do I already have this open? So here's an example that we did for medical taxonomy. I just wanted to show this very quickly. The idea is that you can have a taxonomy, so go back to biology, we choose the animal kingdom, the phylum of chordata, classes of mammals, and anyway, so as we select this, we're getting a subset that's based on the previous selection. We're actually also updating a list box down here of all the species that have passed the filter. So you can take a look at this and see how this works, and you know, choose how that goes, right? So it's just a list of cascading values, and then we have them in tables that have this. And notice that we have sub-data sheets turned on here. How many people here use sub-data sheet name? Rarely, because if you have that set, well, by default it's set as auto, and if you don't set it to none, it really slows down your application. So, so one of the first things you want to do if you're not using sub-data sheets is to set it to none, so you don't get this feature. If you are using the feature, I mean, it comes if you're using referential integrity. It's very valuable and very helpful. So within this database, we also have another screen to show how to do data entry using this. So this is just one form with a subform, and then you can just go in, and as you click through it, go ahead and add a new class or species or whatever it is without having to program through. This part doesn't involve any code whatsoever because it's a feature of the sub-data sheet name. Yes, use sub-data sheet names. Autofill based on text value. So the idea here is you enter a value, you look up a value, you fill out other fields. We use this in zip code lookup. So people type in a zip code, and assuming it's a US address, then we can look up the city and state and fill it in. When we've implemented this for our clients, they think this is like the most valuable thing ever, right? Like forget all the data analytics and all the reports and things like that. Wow, I can put in the zip code and I never could spell Milwaukee or Albuquerque or whatever. So the example of that is, just a zip code fill. This is my address in Virginia, and we have a little drop down that shows from our zip code table the primary city, and lots of cities also, lots of zip codes have secondary cities as well, but they all have at least one primary one. So if we did,
vanity name.
yeah, 148. So you know here nearby in Seattle, you know you'll have this. Seattle's the primary one, but then they have other localities that the post office also considers acceptable. Yeah.
When someone lives in the ritzy neighborhood, they don't want it to say Seattle.
Oh yeah? Is that the way it works?
No, it's called the vanity.
Yeah. So I worked in my county with some of this IT stuff, and it turns out the richest parts of the county have the worst cell phone coverage. Right? They have the worst cell phone coverage because they can't put cell phone towers in their communities because they have the best lawyers in the county to prevent cell phone towers from being put in their backyard. And as a result, they get terrible cell phone coverage, and then they complain about that on their landline. Okay, so. So that's an example of being able to do that with like a zip code lookup, which is very helpful. And you know, as they update the zip code field on the after update event, we truncate it because it could be zip +4 or something. If they have 5 digits, then we do the lookup, and then if we find it, we don't have to do the lookup. We just have to actually we call a command to get the lookup so we can fill the city state, and then we apply the filter for the refresh the filter for the combo box for the city to update appropriately. What else? Linked subforms. Okay, so this is a simple trick. If you have two subforms and want to link them together, this is very simple. You have essentially an invisible form at the parent level that points to the master, and then as you scroll through here, this updates, and then this subform here changes accordingly. Okay, so I'm not going to go through that. I will provide the database so you can see that, but that's very simple. But a more subtle thing is, well, I guess in this case what we're talking about is I want to go into, let's see. Okay, so here's the more critical case. If you are linking subforms to a control, you need to be very careful if the control you're linking to changes. Okay, so if a subform's link to a master field is editable, it changes, then you want to make sure you reference the control and not the field name for the master link field. Let me show you an example of why this is an issue. Because if you don't, then what happens is you end up seeing the wrong data. You think you're looking at the right data, but it's not correct. Okay, so here's the example. I have a table. This is a table that is not being shown here, which is the master table. Let me hide this. I have a master table. It just has 3 fields, okay? And it's got a field that I'm going to edit on. And then I have a detail table that is linked off of this master ID, okay? This is a very simple example. So I have 2 subforms. It's essentially the same subform. Linked to, one is linked to this ID, which is the text box, and the other is linked to the field, right? So if I change this ID from 22 to, what's the other value in here?
223
to 23. If I just change this to 23, okay, this is switching because I went from countries to cars, right? So it just filtered the data differently, but this is still linked on 22 because it's referencing the field, right? And this is a very subtle difference, and sometimes people are editing the values. This won't change, this side won't change until the record is saved. But while I'm editing this record, this master record, the subform isn't reflecting what I'm looking at. Very dangerous. People make bad decisions from this. They're looking at the wrong data. So be very careful when you're linking to the master, what is it, the link master field references the text box, the control, not the field.
Which is why it's better to always rename your fields. Your controls. The controls to not be the name of the field.
Right.
Adding the TXT in this case.
Right, but it's not only adding the TXT to the control, you also have to make sure your subform is referencing the TXT.
Right.
Yes,
So it's
so
a
you
lot
need to do
easier
both.
to do that, though,
It's
isn't it?
easiest to do both.
If they're not the same
Right,
numbers.
right. If they are the same, then which one is it referencing?
Exactly.
I'm not sure. I mean, I always reference them differently, so, but maybe it works the right, I don't know. Anyway, so be very careful about, but this is something that we've run into, we've seen other people run into, and as developers, we don't realize the mistake that's going on because we don't really have ownership of the data. I mean, this is very obvious. I made this very obvious, like a list of cars, list of countries. It's very clear when you're looking at one list versus the other. But if you're looking at sales records for a customer, you may not realize that when you change the customer ID or something, the sales records aren't for that customer. I mean, they look identical, or whatever it might be. So that was the example of that. Just a simple tab tip, which is a couple tabs. So if you have tabs on a form, you can speed things up by, if they have subforms in them, by not setting the subform until someone clicks on the tab. Right? So you set the source object of the subform only when they click on the tab. That way it doesn't slow down the load of the form. The other thing that you can do, which is to change if you have special code that's handling the change event for a form, for a tab, oftentimes you can go by the page ID, right? And the page ID is nice until you need to reorder your pages. Insert a new tab, add a new tab, reorder them, and you can get into a lot of trouble with that. So what we recommend is renaming each page to a name, and then if you have a select case statement that says, here's a tab.value, the value of the page, you use your individual tab's name dot page index, and then that will grab the ID, and then it doesn't matter how you reorder, your code will work. Okay. I have an example of this, but I'm out of time. So basic other form tips, just to remember, form caption, if you don't put a caption on, the name of the form is what appears on the title or tab. Navigation caption, now you have the option to change it from the default record. To do that, always check tab order. So, it's when you add tabs around and someone's using, here when I mean tab, it's a different tab, it's the tab key. When you tab around on a form, you want to make sure it's in the right order. Anchored controls to expand and shrink as the form size adjusts, and put in that fancy centering stuff that Tim mentioned, and spend a day doing that. Hotkeys, the alt letter key, to do that, to tie labels to the individual text boxes, very good for accessibility, but also make sure you're not duplicating the same letter. If you duplicate the same letter, it just rotates from one control to the other. Like if you have two Alt A's, you hit Alt A, it goes to the first one, you hit Alt A again, it goes to the next A, and so on. Totals rows, if you can add that, go ahead. Allow filters, yes, no, go ahead and set that. Scroll bars, set the scroll bars if you want them. If not, turn them off. By default, it's set to both. Check for spelling. We also like to get rid of the record selector if we're not using that. And that's it. So thank you very much for your time. I hope you see you.